We're joined by two excellent guests today who are going to be incredible speaking on this particular topic. First, I'd like to introduce you to Professor Stephen Marshall from East Tennessee State University. Stephen has been a longtime partner of ours. ETSU have been one of our partners from the beginning, one of our first partners in the US. So Stephen is excellently placed to talk about all things that relate to that, and obviously the topics we're going to discuss today. Stephen is the CMO of the ETSU Research Group, and as I say, they're one of our longest standing partners, so an absolute pleasure to have Stephen today. We're also joined by Molly Sote. Molly is the Vice President of Professional Development at the AMA, the American Marketing Association, and Molly's experience is or includes, I should say, working with the learning portfolio and driving employability skills and personal growth for the AMA's marketing community. So again, excellently placed to talk on all these topics today.
Thank you, Sean. Great to be here. And it's exciting to talk to everybody about, all these different ways that you can bring value to your students. I think the combination of these two organizations, along with your university brand, is just a powerful reference point for students and faculty, and also externally, businesses, parents, and everybody else, to say that your university is doing things that are in the interest of industry and preparing students to be in a space once they launch from their big certification, which is their degree at your university. So as Sean said, we're going to run through some we're going to kind of set the table with some trends and some reasons why all these things we're going to talk about are so important. A very important thing to remember throughout this whole webinar is that, within the links to the webinar, you've got the ability to connect with myself or anybody else on this webinar to follow up with questions. I like new friends. I like learning what you're doing, and quite honestly, maybe stealing that for myself, so I can bring more value to my students. So if you feel inclined to reach out and to introduce yourself and share with me, please do. I would really appreciate it. I'm constantly learning and trying to get better, all within the mission of my purpose, my personal purpose, which is to be a contributing force to the educational journey of someone that I get to work with. Teaching the work I love to do and really doing the work I love to teach. So it's a really passionate thing about what I do and why I'm here, and I'm excited to talk about it. So we're going to talk about some trends and set the table. We're going to talk about some practical learning approaches, and there's a whole bunch of them to go through. We're going to really dig into a bit to some hacks in digital platforms and some things that you can do with your students to help them in that job search, but also just kind of getting acquainted with the different opportunities that are in our space. If you think about the marketing space, it is always in transition. Technology is always driving that. And so being able to think about those things and being able to be on top of what's happening while your students are studying with you, but also post-graduation, these are all great opportunities to drive value to them. We're going to talk quite a bit about certifications and micro-certifications and the importance of those. And really, I like to think of it as gamifying, kind of, in a way. Your audience, the younger students that you might have, they're used to these kinds of points in the road where they're getting rewarded for things that we're doing. And I'll talk briefly about what we did with the Digital Marketing Institute more than 3 years ago, to bring a certification into a class that is part of the bigger certification, which would be your diploma or your graduation. And then we'll kind of wrap things up with some soft skills and the importance of that, which really relates to number 2 a lot. And I'll talk about that and some of the data that I've gotten to present in the past around soft skills, or essential skills, I like to call them. And then just kind of some last tips on keeping your curriculum up to date. And then, as you heard Sean say, we're going to take a lot of questions at the end. So please, go ahead and submit those through the chat. And we'd love to answer your questions as time permits at the end. And again, just reach out to me on LinkedIn and we can have the conversation even longer. So really important to think about the fact that higher education is in the midst of major changes. And if we think about, COVID, we go, well, geez, COVID was a big part of that. Well, COVID really was more of an accelerant than a change agent. A lot of these things were already happening. Most of you probably are familiar with the enrollment cliff. This is this whole trend that we're seeing where there's an enrollment. I mean, enrollments are going to be going down as of 2025 significantly. And that's really because of the boomers just didn't have as many babies, but also the fact that COVID and other things have changed the way that we as the consumers will look at higher education. And we have more folks that are looking at other kinds of trades or other kinds of apprenticeship things, or delaying going to college. They're trying some other things out first. And so all these things are mixing and kind of percolating into this this enrollment cliff that we're referencing. And I think it's really important for us to acknowledge it and not blame ourselves or what we're doing in the sense of how our university is doing in the framework of the enrollment cliff. We know the enrollment cliff's coming. It's kind of like we're all driving towards it. So what can we do to really circumvent any kinds of those issues that might come up with that enrollment cliff? It's not like it just all of a sudden happened and it's here and now we got to respond. We have time to respond. And so a lot of what we're doing in this webinar is giving you the tools that you can bring to your classroom and to your faculty to help them drive value and to help you retain, if not grow, your student enrollment through promoting a lot of these things we're going to talk about. So just some quick facts that I know you'll get the copy of the webinar, and I'm happy to share this presentation, or you'll get a copy of the presentation as well. But just some quick facts. 80% of employers believe that the current graduates do not arrive equipped for skills, and this can go back into the fact that students also feel this way. And so you have both sides of each side of the coin here that's going, geez, are we really ready here? Is higher education really doing what it needs to do to get these students in the space? And as I said, I mean, if you're a faculty member and you're not able to keep up with the trends, and you're teaching the same kind of content you were teaching maybe 3, 5, hopefully not 10 years ago, the foundational pieces of all this have not changed, but the way that we activate all those things in a digital space have changed tremendously. And really, keeping up with things on a daily basis is something that's really important. So, this is a big one for me, is this whole 50%, almost 50% graduates are not applying for entry-level jobs. A lot of what you're going to hear me talk about, the things that we try to do at East Tennessee State University, are focused on giving those students that agency and that confidence to be able to apply for those jobs, because they feel like they had those experiences when they were in the institution that are preparing them for those entry-level jobs. And you also have to really communicate to students that an entry-level job, the employer is looking for their most amazing employee they could possibly ever have. They probably don't want to pay that person for what they really are going to try to hire for. So you have to get them over the hump of saying, you got to put your name in the hat to be in the conversation. So a lot of what we're doing is really helping create and talk about, ways that we can prepare these students to have that confidence and to be ready, and employers to be really excited when they get those employees from your institution or those hires from your institution. So all this is being said under the whole umbrella of the fact that we're paying more for less. And I say that as someone that's at a higher education institution. I'm not saying that we're offering less, but I am saying that, what we have to offer in higher education, if we're static, then we're really offering exactly what was much less expensive, 10 years ago. And so shame on us for doing that. I know you're not doing that. We're not doing that at East Tennessee State University. In fact, we're very much the opposite of that here. But the point is that when we have these kinds of trends and we see, very similar to broadcast television, for all of our marketing friends out there, right? We're paying more and more for those spots, but the audience is getting smaller and smaller. And so we really need to remember that this is the lens that we're under in higher education, and these are the things that we need to be thinking about. Going back into the accelerant kind of conversation that I mentioned, or the phrase I mentioned, COVID did change the way that we're thinking about work, and that people are hiring. We have a lot of remote work or hybrid types of options that are out there. I always encourage students, if they can, to try to get a hybrid or a full on-ground job when they first start, because they need to have that mentoring, they need to have those experiences, they need to walk from a conference room down the hall with somebody right after a meeting and not just hit end meeting and then be sitting in a room by themselves. I think there's a lot of coaching and mentoring that happens early in these careers. Really, your whole career should be part of that, but early in the career, to where, you know, these kinds of things are all out there. And so presenting yourself in a remote environment, being good, looking good on Zoom, if you're going to be interviewing on Zoom, which most of us probably are going to interview no matter what on Zoom at some point, having, you know, your lighting, thinking about, you know, how you project and what you look like on camera. It's just really important. We also see trends in e-commerce. Of course, we saw that, a ton of that during COVID. But those are all creating jobs in different spaces that are very applicable to all the students we would be talking about. And so lots of really great opportunities to get into that space. And a lot of times those jobs can be remote, which, like I said, can be amazing if it's your perfect job, but you always should try to see if you can get some way that you can have some kind of an earshot or something to somebody that's in your office that can hear you and mentor you and kind of coach you in an IRL way. And then the last thing is really the how much propelling we've seen with digital technologies, automation, and then of course AI. And AI is a whole nother, if you want to keep up with what's going on with AI, the AMA and DMI have some amazing webinars and different kinds of things that are all part of what's happening with AI. Of course, following people on social media that are doing some amazing stuff with AI is super important. But I think it's important that AI is the way that we teach it and the way I teach it here at East Tennessee State University is this is a powerful tool. You have to learn how to use it. You have to learn how to get good at prompts. You have to learn how all of these different options that you can have. And it can be a way that it can make you much more efficient if you use AI properly. So the future of work is changing. And all this to say, all these trends, this is a fantastic opportunity for you to not just embrace the fact that, oh, our students are going to be down, the cliff is here, we just have to get used to it. That's such a defeatist kind of point of view. You actually should look at it and go, okay, we know it's coming, we know what's happening. Where are niches and areas that we can get better to where we are flat or even grow our student enrollments while others are losing students at a tremendous rate? So again, in chaos, there's also great opportunity. It's such an entrepreneurial mindset. So let's talk a little bit about work integrated and practical learning opportunities. This is kind of the heartbeat of what I do. Micro certifications and experiential learning are two of the things that I pride myself as being a strong advocate for students. I'm going to kick off here. You see a picture there. This is from our university, from East Tennessee State University. We have a complete agenda around our quality enhancement plan, which is part of our Southern Association of Colleges and Schools Commission on Schools accreditation. So that's accreditation for the entire university. And so our entire university has set out on creating opportunities for our students to be working on projects in their discipline with the community or externally from the university. And you see up here, I have written real client work can be the best experience, but it also can be the worst. And it can be the worst when you are not working with clients that are going to be, amenable to the changes and the adaptive and the things that you have to do when you're working with students. Again, that's a whole nother webinar, but it's super important to make sure that not only is it important to have the right team of students and to create great teams within your classroom, but it's also really important to pick the right clients and to have the right partners and to have the right external folks that can work with you. Another thing, and these all have come out of the Digital Marketing Institute Global Education Board. There's about 8 of us on that. There's 250,000 members of DMI. But there's only 8 of us in the world that are on this education board. I'm one of 2 in North America. And so these were all things that came out of all the research that we've done internally on that board, advisory board for the Digital Marketing Institute. So the second one here is just simulations. And there's amazing simulations that are out there. Simulations are really powerful because they give nearly almost immediate feedback or quicker feedback on how you're doing. But they're very particular for very particular kinds of scenarios. And the AMA does some amazing certifications, and I'll pass it to Molly to talk a little bit about what the AMA is doing. Simulations.
Sure, Stephen, thanks so much. So simulations we do primarily through our collegiate community. So the AMA really serves three different communities: our collegiate students who have collegiate chapters across the United States and elsewhere. We have programming for our professional marketers, and then we also have programming and offerings for research-focused academics, PhDs. So simulations is, a really popular experiential learning product, as Stephen mentioned, for our collegiate students. We run those at our annual International Collegiate Conference that happens every March. We also do a lot of other experiential learning programs for that community, that student community. All throughout the year. We do a number of competitions as well. We'll talk about those next. The simulations, like Stephen said, really are an amazing tool for our students to really kind of dig into what work looks like. Curriculums are great, right? Book learning is great, but really having your students get hands-on experience about what that entry-level job is going to look like is super, super vital in 2023 and moving forward. So I think on the next slide, we'll talk about competitions as well, similar vein. So the AMA does a number of competitions, again, through our International Collegiate Conference, and then across the entire academic year for our students. We do a case competition. That's really our largest competition. It happens all across the year. Students work on it starting at the beginning of their academic year in August, September. Every year we have a sponsor. We've had the Wall Street Journal, we've had Amazon, we've had a number of sponsors. Really, it's an incredible value for them because they get a number of these really high-performing students create an incredible marketing campaign beginning to end for one of their products. We've actually had a lot of those sponsors, those employers, end up hiring our students who were part of that case competition, because really, at the end of the day, that's showing what does the work actually look like. That's wonderful that you're graduating with an undergraduate degree. That really shows off that you have certain knowledge, but really it's about the skills. What skills do you have that you're bringing to this entry-level job? We also have sales competitions. We have a competition we call Perfect Pitch, which is actually where students sit down and pitch themselves as if they were in an interview. They're pitching their own strengths and skills. So we do a number of, again, those simulations and competitions. Really, we've seen that's super important for this community.
Yeah, thanks, Molly. And the picture here that I picked out here was from our third place team at East Tennessee State University with Professor Michelle Sullivan in the picture there. And so this was just last year, and we kick ass here on these competitions. I'm just going to say East Tennessee State University is pretty good. But I think, going back to what Molly just said, I'm going to talk a little bit about more of these competitions that we do. But I think the important piece that I want to bring into this is that, as Molly said, it's super important for these students to get the skills. And the skills happen in real time in these different kinds of experiences. You have to have students experience the work to be able to really feel like they have the agency and confidence. You're helping them with that confidence every single time you're allowing them to be uncomfortable a little bit. And these competitions and simulations and things put students in a space that makes them a little uncomfortable. That's a good thing, because then they have to think on their feet. They're going to remember those things better. All that stuff activates in the brain differently than kind of passive learning. This is all very active learning that we want to do, and active reflection, which is this most important probably part of learning. But to Molly's point, I'm at East Tennessee State University. I'm a recovering department chair for 7 years. I've been here almost 20 years now. This is my 18th year as a professor. And I can tell you, from doing work outside of the university for brands like Coca-Cola and Adobe and others, in my consulting business, I don't hire anybody because they have a degree. I hire people because of what they show me they can do with the tools that they brought to the opportunity. And the degree is a super important one, yes, 100%. But if you're not able to amass the evidence as to why you should be hired, then that is really a hindrance or a wall to getting your ability to get that not only first job, but many other jobs. And it's really, so it's creating these opportunities. DMI, AMA have created all these different ways that, and you in your classroom can create all these different ways that you can bridge that gap and put students directly into the skills-based and learning-based active learning space. So AMA has amazing competitions that you just heard about. We've been participating also. Our university has also participated, not only with the AMA ones, but also with the American Advertising Federation. You see here a couple of my crew from last year. And out of the last 5 years, we've been in the national championships 3 in the last 5 years, top 8 in the country. We've won districts 4 out of those last 5. So we're pretty good, but we at East Tennessee State University see a lot of value in these students participating in these kinds of competitions where they have a real client and they have to compete against other schools collegiately across the United States to present, to put together the ideas, everything, the campaigns, everything that's part of that. The last thing I'm going to talk about in the sense of experiential learning is my role in the East Tennessee State University Research Corporation. And so as you heard in my introduction, I'm the Chief Marketing Officer for that. That's an organization that sits on top of our Research Foundation. And the Research Foundation, our job in the Research Corporation is to help bring innovation to our region, to partner with the university, but also to help the innovation that happens at East Tennessee State University, to help monetize it, commercialize it. You know, folks that invent something in a lab or you know, create an amazing film or whatever they might do, you know, those folks are not necessarily the marketers or the people that know how to monetize those things. So that's really the role of the Research Corporation. So it's a university organization. And the reason why it's up here is because it's we have an entire capstone experience that is built around students doing all the social media, all the e-blasts, the website build, creating videos, doing all the kinds of stuff that we would do to try to drive folks through our consumer funnel to become signups or to attend our events or whatever those goals and objectives might be. And these students are using, and HubSpot's a great partner for this, so they're using HubSpot's education partner platform, and we have everything built on that to support that. But then they're also using things like ClickUp for project management, and they're using Canva and Adobe and all these other things. So they're using every bit of the software that they're going to use in a real space, in a real environment to amass those skills, to produce the evidence, to say, let me show you how our event exceeded expectations by 35%. Here's all the metrics on it. This is what it was about. And these are the things that we did. We knew we drove people to the event, and this is how we optimize our campaign. And those are all things that you can do in these kinds of events. And you would be surprised at your university how many other organizations at your university would love to partner with you to work on these kinds of things. We have great partnerships across our entire university at East Tennessee State University. I guess the last one here is really talking about case studies. And you go, well, Stephen, I use case studies. So like, why is this up here? Because I firmly believe you can use a case study more aggressively than you are. So for all of my classes that are applicable here, I start every single class off with an FE case. And the FEs are award-winning, effective campaigns. And it doesn't cost very much to join that database. And in fact, there's other ones. In fact, if you're a DMI, then you got these case studies already. But WARC has some great case studies, and you can sort and look for them right here. Great places to do that. But basically, I take 5 minutes at the beginning of every class just to go through what were the objectives, what were the personas, the audience, what was the insight, what did they do, and how did they measure success. And so as I do that every single time, those key steps get ingrained into what students need to think about when they're going to try to create some really great marketing campaigns. So again, everybody uses case studies in some way, shape, or form, no question. But I would say you can be more aggressive with them, and it's a great way to kick off a class because you can reference it back and forth as the class goes. So helping your students with digital platforms, this is something, again, I pride myself in helping students really kind of hack these platforms. And some quick kind of beats on this. And again, I'm happy to have longer conversations with people if you want to reach out to me on LinkedIn about how we do this. There's all kinds of amazing resources on LinkedIn and other places on how to really optimize your profile. I always talk to students about thinking like an SEO person with their profile. Go look at the jobs that you want to have and go find the language and the words that are being used in those jobs and start to integrate that language and words into your own LinkedIn profile. You're going to do that within, the very top part of your LinkedIn profile, but also your about section, how you write that, that's a great place to where you want to put some of your essential skills or soft skills we're going to talk about in a minute. But you can do a lot of different things if you think like an SEO person around your LinkedIn profile. You can also join groups and keep up with trends and find out what's going on there. Following companies is a really great way to, the companies that you aspire to work for. When you do that, then you can start to drill down and see other people that work there. And I encourage students to always engage, message those folks. There's no reason that you can't send a message, say, hey, do you think you might have 10 minutes to talk about how you launched your career? I'm just getting started. And I'd really like some input from you. So there's lots of different ways you can do that. Passively building your engagement, clicking on people, so the folks of us that are, pay for the upper membership of LinkedIn, we can get in, and I guess others, I've paid for it for so long, I'm assuming you still can get this, but to be able to see who's looking at your profile, who's viewed your profile. So I tell students, go view profiles of people that you'd like to be like, and let the person that has the profile see that you're viewing them, and maybe do that, and then maybe send that cold message on LinkedIn to say, hey, if you might have 10 minutes for a Zoom, I'd love to talk to you about how you started your career. So these are all very actionable kinds of things that we wanted to deliver today to you. Indeed is another great place to do similar things. The first hack I have here is to trick the robots. So again, that's going back into putting yourself into the mindset of a search engine optimization person and going and looking at the jobs that you're interested in, creating your profile on LinkedIn and making sure you're using that same language. Just like in LinkedIn, there's great networks to go and be a part of. This is a great way for you to be found versus applying. So, if you're able to create your profile to where you can show some of the evidence, some of the simulation outcomes from the AMA or some of the case winnings that you might have done, some work you might have done for, a university organization or an external client, like those are all places that you can showcase it. But this is before you're going to apply for something. You're out there, and you'd be surprised at how much, you could get inbounds based on building that content strategy around yourself and your own persona. Of course, following those companies similar to what we talked about with LinkedIn, super important. And then just making sure that you upload your resume. This is a really important one because so many of these digital platforms are going to just pull your stuff in, and they could pull it in and they could look beautiful, or they could pull it in and they can look really janky. So if you control what your resume looks like, if you create your resume and you upload it, then really it's now PDF and it's now controlled. It's not going to be amassed and stitched together from different ways that you filled things out, to where from a recruiter side or from an employer side, it might look funky, and they may not know that it's looking funky. They may not know why it looks funky, but it looks funky, and that may not be a great thing for you. So some great kind of hacks you can think about in digital platforms. So the third thing that we're going to talk about today is really these industry certifications. And again, this is the heartbeat of what we're talking about, but a heartbeat of what I care about. And these are all signals that you're sending to an employer, or a signal that you're sending from your university to your region, your community, your industries that you serve, to say, we care enough about what we're doing at our university to make sure we're partnering with external organizations to bring the industry into our classroom in a very unique and specific way. And so we've seen growth in this over the last few years. and COVID accelerated that, but the growth has just been kind of crazy because we see it not only baked into our own academic institutions where we'll create our own micro certification, that is something that stands alone at our university, but also industry, software platforms and organizations and folks are creating all these different kinds of things. What I would say is the mojo, the magic here happens when you have an academic institution and an industry partner coming together to really create a unique micro certification partnership. You've got the academic foundation of the instructor or the instructor of record or whoever that might be in the classroom, and you've got the bridge to an AMA DMI kind of partner that's able to really help say, geez, this is the most current content that you could possibly have for your classroom. And that's why, it was really easy for me almost 4 years ago now to become the first accredited program in the United States with the Digital Marketing Institute, because we wanted to make sure we were always as current as we possibly could be within our university. And so when we look at the growth of universities, you can see that this is still in the adoption curve. It's very early. And this is a great opportunity for you to start to get in this space. Again, that cliff is coming 2025. You got a year and a half. Don't sit around and wait for it and blame the cliff on why your numbers are down or why you don't have the students you should have. Take advantage of the fact you are aware of that cliff right now and start making these moves to be able to drive this value for your students, to position your university in a different way, but also just to do what's right, which is to bring the most value you can to your students. So what we're doing at ETSU, we've done a whole bunch of different partners. You've already heard me talk about HubSpot. They've been an amazing partner for us. Of course, Google has had some really great micro certifications over time that a lot of times we'll bake into our classes depending on what, no, it's supposed to be silenced. Depending on what the class is. The Digital Marketing Institute, which you'll hear more about here in a second, we brought that in almost 4 years ago into a media strategy class at the undergraduate level and a brand content strategy class at the graduate level. We're using the same certification at both levels because the graduate class, of course, is different, but the foundation, some of those graduate students come in without that foundation. So we want to make sure that they have that same foundation. And the certification that we're talking about here today is fantastic for not only for marketing students, but I would say for any student. Think about creative writers and thinking and understanding SEO. Think about designers and graphic designers and understanding how to create more engaging content. These are all foundational kinds of things. So while today we're talking a lot about marketing students, I would really encourage you to think wider than that and just think about attaching a Digital Marketing Institute, American Marketing Association certification to someone who is studying literature and language and is studying how to be a creative writer. How many more job opportunities are those folks going to end up having? It's really powerful. We brought on early on, I've done a lot of work for Adobe, and so early on we brought in the Adobe Certified Professional Program. So basically we have these certifications for students in our major. The costs of all these things, you maybe want to geez, what are the costs of all these things? We bake all those costs in our student fees. So students, this is all value add to what they're doing studying with us. That's how we designed it. But this is where students can earn that badge in Photoshop or InDesign, Premiere, in Illustrator, those really key software platforms that help you create that content to help you, drive that content velocity that you want to have. And the last one I'm going to mention here is one that I was able to create with our partners at Brand Storytelling. And Brand Storytelling is an organization here in the United States that has three different events. One is a sanctioned event at Sundance where we celebrate brand films, and we think about how we use brand story to be able, and storytelling to be able to create brand affinity and create better connections to audiences. So brand film is one of our certifications, and the other one is purpose-driven brand storytelling. So this is all really taking brands and understanding the purpose that is behind that brand. And so this was a gap that we identified, brand storytelling and myself identified. And so we created these 2 certifications that are sponsored by brands. We had our first one that was sponsored by Intel. Other ones have been sponsored by Body Armor, by GoDaddy. And students work on, similar to the other competitions that you heard, they work on an RFP and then they present to the client, and that's how they earn that badge. And so again, if you're interested in understanding more about any of these certifications, I'm happy to talk about it. But this is, as I already said, this is a really great opportunity for you to jump in the water, because really we're very much in the very early adoption curve of any of these micro certifications. And as I said at the beginning of the webinar, this is a great way for you to create or gamify opportunities for students to win these different micro certifications during their longer journey of the big certification, which is that degree. So I'm going to pass it over to Sean to talk about what DMI and AMA have been doing. Sean and Molly.
I'm happy to talk a little bit about the AMA DMI partnership. Stephen really gave a great overview of a lot of really great micro-credential and experiential learning products that are out there that his university is using. AMA has just partnered with DMI on a similar product. So AMA and DMI have been partners in the professional certification space for years. So we provide a variety of different sort of professional certifications, super high level and mid-level for folks already in their careers. And we are just thrilled to be offering a micro-credential product to students through universities. We found really great success for our learners and for our professional certified marketers, that they're really just better equipped, better qualified for the jobs that they want. We are excited to bring that to the student population. So, as we said, this is, there's such a value in this experiential learning. To make your university stand out. So professors, marketing departments, business schools all do an incredible job of transferring that knowledge. We know that it's that combination of skills, of employable skills and that knowledge that really is going to make those students job ready. So really looking at rounding out that learning experience, this kind of micro-credential is just vital for those programs.
I just plan to just bring you through a little bit about what DMI do. It speaks to a lot of the points that Stephen has made already, so it's all highly relevant. So at the core of what we do is providing, obviously, learning content, but also certification. And of the currently 82 university partners that we have now and rapidly growing, we can actually work in a number of different ways. And probably today is not the time or place to go through those. I have some information on an upcoming webinar where we will discuss those. But essentially at the core of it, it is that certification, micro-credentials, as Stephen was talking about, and then, of course, the content. And then just to very briefly touch on how we approach content and that side of things. Stephen actually mentioned the academic advisory board. So we do actively look for the opinions, the advice, the guidance of people in the academic sphere, such as Stephen here today. And we also go to the industry as well, which is very important. So we have our Global Industry Advisory Council. Too many members to mention right now. I think we're at about 24 members, but they are people from senior positions in Facebook, LinkedIn, Google, Coca-Cola, and so on. So we have frequent discussions with them to advise on the content to make sure it's industry relevant, speaking to the conversation today. And also just to kind of inform us about, kind of changes or trends that are happening as well, because it's a very kind of agile, kind of changing space, digital marketing. So the next thing, and it speaks to some of the points Stephen was talking about again, is just our course content. Within it, there's a lot of practical learning and simulations. Molly touched on simulations and how the AMA approach that. We embed those in our courses as well, kind of practical learning a lot of visual learning, and a lot of recall of, using certain platforms, using tools. We also reflect that in our membership platform then as well. And case studies came up with many case studies, and we're a big believer in how important they are. And within the membership platform, you'll find a whole wealth of content, really, toolkits, ebooks, podcasts, webinars, and case studies, of course. And we have a lot of different kind of areas that we like to cover. It's not just digital marketing learning, it's career-related learning as well. So even things like practical things like how to build your CV, for example. With that said, coming back to the core of what we do, it's certification and accreditation with universities. So if you partner with us, your students coming through using our content, which is obviously one part of the equation that's really important. Also at the end, they get that micro credential from DMI when we accredit your course. And then also it's important to bring up our new partnership with the AMA. So as of just a couple of weeks ago, really, students who are enrolled in DMI accredited programs in the United States also receive an associate level industry certification from the AMA. So going back to the importance of micro credentials, your students or universities who partner with us, their students get 2 certifications. And, that doesn't come with an additional exam. It doesn't come with some workload or some burden that you have as a partner. And it's really valuable for the student. And I think the 2 stats below kind of give an indication of that. So 2 key stats: 84% of students from DMI partner universities say that DMI content and the credential that we award are highly relevant at the practical digital experience, to their degree as well. That's on a survey that we did last year. And employers then on that side, 75% of employers say they are more likely to hire candidates that have a DMI certification on their CV. So really important stat there. I did touch on it, but there's lots of different ways that we can work with partners. We have an upcoming webinar in the coming months. It will be a DMI University Partnership Open Day. So if anyone wants to know a little bit more about the different models and ways that we work with universities, that will be a must attend. There will be a lot of information in that there. We also have the handouts in the handout section there for you today. There's one for international partners, people who are considering it, and one for US universities who are considering partnership. And there is the email address of my colleague Michelle in there as well, who would be more than happy to take any questions that you have around partnerships. So with all of that said, I wanted to kind of throw it over to Molly, and I wanted to kind of bring it back to what we were talking about there, and kind of get your take, Molly, on why the DMI and AMA partnership is important in the context of student employability.
Absolutely. So, again, we've talked a lot about kind of that dichotomy of knowledge and skills, and this really is going to bring those students those employable skills. I think, like Stephen said, really that the stat that is really jumping out at me at all of the information he had was that only 49% of recent graduates feel ready for an entry-level job. That, if you're thinking about it from a marketing perspective in terms of customer satisfaction with a very and increasingly expensive product, a 4-year degree, universities, it's time, as we look at that enrollment cliff, as we look at that satisfaction rate, it's time to kind of start thinking a bit differently about what that education looks like and what that full package of a valuable education looks like. Employing your students, giving your students access to this kind of this kind of credential is really at the end of the day going to get them to the top of that pile, their resume to the top of the pile when they're applying for jobs. So we have been really impressed with working with DMI. Again, that the training and the certifications that they provide are just top notch. We, as the American Marketing Association authority on marketing, would not partner with anyone who wasn't at that level. So we're excited about this product and know that it's going to bring incredible value to the universities who use it.
Excellent. Thanks, Molly. I think I'm going to pass it back over to Stephen.
Yeah, so I just want to say a couple more things, and I want to be conscious of time here. But the relationship with the Digital Marketing Pro certification that has been kind of baked in with AMA and DMI for a long time was a big signal for me as to initially doing this program 4 years ago, the one that we're doing, which is the accreditation piece to that. That to me was peer proof, at the top, as Molly said. I mean, the premier marketing expert in the United States, the American Marketing Association, maybe globally. But that group coming in and saying, yeah, these folks, DMI, who's, like I said, 250,000 members worldwide, globally, they put that stamp on there. So that was number one. The second thing I want to mention here before we jump off of this is that, again, I'm happy to walk people through what this experience has been for me personally, at East Tennessee State University. But an important piece to know is, like, when you hear that word accreditation, you're like, oh my gosh, like that's a word that's scary in higher education. DMI does not make this scary. DMI is very hands-on and hands-off. So they're very hands-on in the sense of telling you exactly what they need you to show them to accredit your program, to know that you're measuring the learning outcomes that they expect and you're measuring it in the way that you should. And then really, once you do that, they're hands off. They're like, okay, we've agreed on what the assessment's going to be. We agree on how we're going to be able to award the credential. And we're going to check in with you, but we're not going to be breathing over your shoulder. So it's really, in the sense of accreditation kinds of processes at a university, it's probably the friendliest one that I've been able to have. So just something to think about. And I think maybe we'll just there's Molly's or Michelle's information if you wanted to find out more, and I'm sure we can drop that in the chat as well. I want to make sure we have some time for some questions. So I'm going to run through, the importance of these soft skills. And these soft skills, they get built when you get away from lecturing and testing. They get built when you're delivering hands-on experiences. You're allowing students to fail. I'm that professor that sometimes I get maybe a complaint or two every once in a while because I didn't hold somebody's hand. And that's by design. Like, I don't want to do that. I want to make sure that students have the opportunity to be able to learn by doing, and failing fast is not a bad thing, because the part of that makes that not a bad thing is the reflection on that. And so, we have to think about the idea of essential skills or soft skills as being something that every employer, as you just saw the quote from the CEO of ZipRecruiter, is thinking about, right? So I wanted to quickly run through this study. Again, you'll have the presentation so you can read this in more detail, but this is a study that I got to present in 2019 with Adobe. Adobe and Edelman did this study together. And really, it's a powerful study. I think that, you should try to incorporate into what you're doing in the classroom or at your institution. Because what they did was they looked at 2 million job postings, and then they looked at 2 million resumes. And they did the gap analysis to figure out, where are these two things not lining up? And they didn't just do it, for anything. They looked specifically at creative and soft skill sets. So communication and collaboration, creativity, critical thinking, those kinds of things, to see what are resumes saying and what are employers looking for. And they didn't just do that for a marketing lens. They looked at all these different disciplines, and it really tried to find in-demand kinds of growing career fields where this is important. So you can see the breadth of disciplines is very wide. And what they found was that when they looked at these 18 career fields, and they looked at what job postings, the percentage of job postings that were listing skills, these job postings were looking for people who were good communicators, that were creative, good collaborators. However, our students are, I say our students in the sense of all the folks on this webinar right now, our students are not doing a good job communicating that they can do those things to an employer, with an employer. So they're not communicating that they are creative, or they're not communicating that they are good communicators. And this goes back to the Indeed and the LinkedIn hacks, and this goes back to the importance of those experiences through simulation or through case study, through competitions, or through experiential learning and community-based learning, because those are all the opportunities that give the evidence to be able to then, in an SEO kind of way, make sure that your LinkedIn profile talks about how you've been creative on a project, or talks about how you led communication for a group project. You can bring those kinds of things in a natural way into how you position yourself. I got the privilege to be on a podcast, 33 Tangents podcast, that's led by Jason Thompson, who's the CEO of 33 Sticks, analytics boutique that works with big Fortune 500s. And they had asked me when I did the webinar, they said, hey, can you come on the webinar and interview us on what we look for people to hire, new hires in the analytics space? We got about 30 minutes into the podcast, and I paused everybody on the podcast and said, hey guys, you realize you haven't said anything about hard skills. You haven't said anything about, JavaScript or you being able to run different kinds of analyses and different kinds of software, or whatever that might be. You've only said things about, you need somebody who's a good communicator, somebody who's a good critical thinker, problem solver, and it was just such an interesting thing to where, as Jason says here, the soft skills are what turns raw data into insights and transforms ideas into action. So it's such an important part of everything that we're talking about here. I'm going to blaze through this last one so we have time for questions, but these are just kind of 3 ways that I keep up with what's happening. One of them is just to keep learning and adapting as a teacher, looking outside, finding industry partners, doing the work that we teach, working in those clubs that we might be part of, AMA or AAF or whatever those clubs might be, to find and work with professionals to figure out how can we do better? How are my students doing? You could talk to a student that might have graduated 3 years ago and say, how well did we prepare you? Be honest. Like, what were things that you wish that you had gotten here? And then now you've got that feedback to where you can bring those kinds of things into your classroom. The second thing is really, incorporating what's happening in the space, the emerging technologies, getting students into ChatGPT if they're not using it, finding ways to bridge what's happening in emerging topics so they get these experiences, because they may be too, scared or not informed to jump into the lake and learn how to swim. And I like to just throw them in there and not let them drown. I'm going to pull them out, but I'm going to let them flail a little bit, because that's all very important to their learning process. And then the last thing is just going back in and finding out how are we doing and what are things that we can do better, and making sure that you have amazing partners like the American Marketing Association and the Digital Marketing Institute, who can bring all this current information and different ways of thinking to the table. So with that, we're a little bit over, but I wanted to just tee up an opportunity for Sean and Molly and I to answer any questions you might have.
Sure. And I should say, if anyone has a question they want to pop in, now's the time to do it. But I'm going to start here with a question from Ray. And it's for you, Stephen. So it starts with a compliment, which is nice too. Stephen is a great speaker. But the question from Ray is, so Ray is wondering if there is any data that tracks the field-specific employment success in your class, Stephen, versus other degrees in the same field.
Is there any data that we can add? I mean, the university tracks those kinds of things. I don't know how well we compare to Ray to others, but the university does. If you're at a university, that's not an easy task to do. So I wouldn't say that we're exceptionally good at it, and I think higher education is not exceptionally good at it in general. But I do know that we do connect and stay connected through a platform like through LinkedIn is a great way to do that. And one of the great ways to do that is to look at who has a DMI certification. That's an easy way to find our former students in that particular way.
Excellent. We don't have too many questions, so I'm going to prompt everyone to try to get their questions in again. But I do have one more, Stephen. I believe this is for yourself. It's from Greg. Greg asks if you can provide a little bit more detail on how you find the client-led projects that you were talking about.
Sure. Yeah. So they're not hard to find, quite honestly. There are some really good, they're not coming to mind right now. There are some pretty good organizations that can bring those to the table. Molly, you might remember some, but Ripon might be one, right? Ripon, maybe. But those are things that you usually have to pay for. And I'm not saying that that's bad. I'm just saying there's a lot, if you look in your community, there's a lot of opportunities. The things that you have to make sure that you vet as you do that is to make sure that you are talking to the decision maker, number one. I've gotten in trouble a couple times because I've talked to somebody who is not the decision maker. They're a couple, steps down the ladder. And then that ends up adding time, like, oh, we'll be meeting this person next week. Oh, this person had COVID. It's going to be another week. Now all of a sudden we're 2 weeks, into the course and we're not any further along in the project. So making sure that you're talking to the decision maker, making sure that the decision maker understands the scope of work. So I always write a scope of work that, some kind of an SOW or an agreement that we know that we're going to have, and the expectations ahead of time. But we have both done this for paid and non-paid clients. I run the RC Content Studio, which is out of the Research Corporation, and that is a paid content creation studio that we generated revenue. We just launched it this summer, but we generated revenue working with real clients on real projects, having students and professionals working together. So there's different ways to think about it. Again, I'm super happy to have somebody reach out to me and talk more in depth about all these things.
Excellent. And then I think I have some questions here that might be for myself, because they're DMI specific. Again, if anyone has a question, we've got about 1 or 2 minutes left, so try get them in here. But we have a question here about certifications, and do we have certifications in professional selling subjects? The simple answer is yes, we do. We have an entire course around selling and social selling. So I think we are through all our questions, unless I see a few thank you messages. And I see there was a question. Actually, Molly, if I might just ask you this question here, it was just around the AMA. I believe you might have answered it in the chat, but does the AMA work with any other marketing associations, such as the Canadian Marketing Association? And the second part of that question was, as well as, does DMI have a partnership or plans of partnership with the CMA? But Molly, I'll throw it to you first. I wasn't too sure about this one.
Sure. Yeah. So I did send an answer in the chat, but happy to talk a bit about that as well. So at the national level, so I work for the International Support Center. So we also have chapters across the country and the world. We have professional chapters, and then we have our collegiate chapters as well. We also have academic special interest groups. So all of those groups they're connected to the support center, but they also do their own programming, their own kind of information sharing, their own social gatherings, things like that. While at the support center level, we do not partner with the Canadian Marketing Association at this time as such in a formal way. I do believe our Toronto chapter has a close relationship with the Canadian Marketing Association. And I certainly am open to not only that conversation, but any kind of partnership conversations. Really, I think at the end of the day, we share goals in terms of elevating the marketing industry and providing employable skills to every type of marketer and people who just want to know about marketing and learn about marketing. So certainly open to those conversations.
Excellent. And someone has just reminded me that I should mention that DMI and the AMA have a dual certificate for anyone taking the DMI Pro if you're in North America, if you're in Canada as well, which is highly relevant. And then we do have another question, which is a bit DMI specific, but I'll just come to it because it's a good question. So this question is from Alexander, and it's about do the students, and I'm paraphrasing your question, Alexander, do the students get access to any specific tools And does the DMI certification require students to complete their micro certifications? On this, what we actually do is instead of going through an incredibly complicated process where we might try sign everyone up for use of Google's platform and then Facebook's and so on, it'd be very hard to manage and so on. We actually have built practical elements into membership and into our courses. In a course like the DMI Pro, for example, they sit at the end of most modules where there's 3 practical tasks on the particular topic. So if we just take social as an example, there's a demo there of how to set up an ad on Facebook Ads Manager, for example. But what we look to do is we look to build them in, those simulations in, and we do of course realize the importance of simulations and all the great points that Stephen made on it too. So I think at this point we are through our questions. We're in good time. We've gone 3 minutes over the hour.
Sean, can I answer one more question on here?
Sorry, Stephen. Yeah.
Yeah. So the question about ensuring student learning outcomes, and I think this is something I didn't get to comment on. But when you partner on this accreditation approach with the AMA and DMI, they're as I said, they're very relaxed in the sense of how you deliver those, and so they give you presentation decks. They give you kind of notes, which would basically almost be like a textbook for like a whole section. But then you get access to their entire platform, which has all those things that Sean had already mentioned, and the modules, the learning modules, asynchronous modules for the same content you're doing. So you can ensure that your student learning outcomes are being met because you're the one who is picking and choosing how you want to deliver that content to your students. And in our particular way, we do that through a mix of things. I'll bring in the deck into class. I will assign the asynchronous stuff outside of class so that I know that they've gone through those modules. In fact, part of the homework is I require a screenshot so that I can see what that looks like. But then that gives me a lot more liberty within class to really talk about the case studies and the application of what we're teaching. So I just think from educator point of view and being practitioner in the classroom, I think it's an important one, Sean. I wanted to make sure that I got to.
No, absolutely. Thanks for that, Stephen. Much appreciated. Just before we wrap up, just to flag a few quick things very quickly. So again, the slides from this presentation today are downloadable. They're on the right hand side there in the handout section, so you'll be able to get access to all of them. Secondly, the brochures are there. So if you want to contact DMI at any point, the details and the understanding on how to do all that is there. And lastly, the recording will be available next week, again, just to confirm. And you'll be able to watch it back in full or pass it on to a colleague or whatever you might wish to do. So the very last thing I'd like to do is say a very big thanks to Molly and to Stephen today. An excellent presentation. And of course, thanks to everyone who came to watch live, and indeed who will be watching this back at a later point. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.